Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. My guests tonight are my friend Dennis Kitchen returning, and this time because he is the subject of an upcoming documentary, currently in its pre-launch time on Kickstarter. So go and save and be notified on launch for the oddly compelling The Denis Kitchen Story on Kickstarter right now from Tinto Press, and I have directors Ted Intorcio and Soren Christiansen to join me to tell me what they think is oddly fascinating about Denis. I just think it's fun to talk baseball with them, but
Hmm.
I'm certain that they have more. I mean, for that matter, I've already gone through your list of interviewees and seen a number of people that I either like talking to myself or want to talk to myself. So I'm impressed at the beginning stages, I guess, of your work. So Ted or Soren, take it away. Tell us what inspired you, what you're going after, what's cool. Why should we give you money other than I say so? And like my
Well,
say so doesn't mean much.
I met Dennis through Ted, so I'll let Ted start, and then I can certainly jump in at some point.
Okay. Um, so I met, this is Ted. I met Dennis at a Denver independent comic convention that I was part of called Dink. And he was for the first year of it, he was, he was actually a guest every year at that. And I think was that in 2017 or 20
It sounds
something?
about right.
Yeah. And he wandered over to uh, my table. I was also tabling there, and he goes, hi, I like your stuff, and we just started chatting, and I found out he was Denis Kitchen, and I said, oh, geez, you're famous, aren't you? And we just hit it off, I guess, and I was surprised that this guy that had the kind of successes that he had wanted to talk to low life like myself.
I know that feeling really well.
Yeah. It was, and so I've known him for several years. He turned me on to a project with Mort Walker, the guy that did Beetle Bailey, who lives not too far. I mean, same, maybe a couple of hours away from Dennis. Anyway, was shooting that. Nothing actually happened with that particular project, but after I was done shooting at Mort's house, he invited me to come and visit his house, and me and the guy I was shooting with, we came out there, and we're just amazed at his place and the kinds of stuff that he had hanging on the walls, and the Valley of the Dolls, which maybe we'll talk about later, that he has in basically his backyard. And we kept in contact. We worked on a couple of things. I published at least what was it? I'm working on publishing another book, but I published one of his Creatures from the Subconscious books. And I was also doing some work with Soren, some freelance. I do motion design for as a freelancer for my paycheck or whatever.
Paychecks are good.
Paycheck,
We're in favor of paychecks around here.
You wanna make enough to live. Anyway,
Also, health insurance. Health insurance is good.
I was just, oh yeah, if you can manage it. I just wanted to, I was, talking to Soren one day, and I said, you should meet this friend of mine, Denis Kitchen. Soren's not a comic book guy, but he is kind of a pot smoking hippie, sort of, not a communist, I said, I said that in tongue in cheek, obviously, but they seemed to have some things in common. So he goes, yeah, let's do a Zoom or whatever. And we met that way. And then before you know it, Soren, is suggesting we do a documentary on him. And I was actually developing an idea to animate some of Denis Kitchen's work, his characters anyway. And I thought, okay, that's a better venue than trying to come up with a half-hour show. Let's work on a documentary together. And Soren and I both worked at Turner in the early 2000s. And so we had a lot of respect for each other's work. And boy, it just seemed to work out.
Yep. Yep. And Dennis's story was, oddly compelling. It certainly is worthy there to use that quote. It was a lot of fun to talk with Dennis and hear about his life. And so I am a history major, and so when talking about his past with Underground Comics, they brought up the First Amendment battle with the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. That's excuse me, when a light bulb went off for me, because there's relevance. Two things are important to want to know something. If you know about someone and are intrigued by that person, then you're willing to listen to more about that person. And so Dennis is someone who is worth knowing. Incredibly interesting stories. I've been to his house, I think, is it twice or three times, Dennis? Twice.
Yeah.
And
now I'm getting jealous. I got to come out east.
It's amazing.
Seems like he invites everybody.
Denis has a beautiful home that was a mill in the 1800s. And
oh, that sounds cool.
It has the pond, and it has the sluice, which is the water gate. You can still see that where the original pioneers who built that. So it's just a really neat piece of property. And then when you have life-size big boy statues outside that Denis was able to find from restaurants, when you cross over a little bridge and you're in the Valley of the Dolls, it's just a neat little paradise. And then you go inside and it's just like you're walking into a collector's paradise. Denis has collected just a tremendous amount. The difference between me and Denis and most people is that Denis has categorized, itemized everything. I mean, it truly is extraordinary. And there's a reason why Denis does that, and I'll let him share that about who he is and why he's done that. But it really is fascinating to walk around there and just to see walls of eyeballs, walls, of dogwood, walls of, what else? I mean, everything that I could imagine as far as vintage postcards, toys are in that house and displayed. So it's a lot of fun to be there.
The oddly compelling, wasn't that hard of a title to come up with, because everything about what Denis is interested in, and he not only collects, and he does it very artistically. He's constantly creating art, not just drawing, although he draws quite a bit. So when the notion of doing a documentary about him came up, originally I was like, well, this is just a really cool guy behind the guy thing, where he was never quite in the spotlight to the extent of people like R. Crumb and Charles Burns and some of these people that he's published in the past. So that to me was interesting. But then the whole notion of the fact that he's played quite a large part in the fight for freedom of the press and freedom of speech, and giving the voiceless a voice, giving them a podium from which to speak in a sense. He was the first person to publish gay comics, for instance. It wasn't just.
It wasn't the first.
Yeah.
But he wasn't. I think we double checked that. There was somebody else who published, but he was one of the first to do that. He broke through the mold on that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for that correction. Anyway, and I don't want to keep talking. I actually want to let Denis talk a little bit, but I did want to bring that up.
But I mean, what
you're saying, Denis?
We'll get there. I hadn't asked him a question. He's been on the show before.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk so much.
The one thing though, I was just going to say is when we started this, the First Amendment factor was there. but it grew. I was very fortunate. Pete Poplawski, who's an amazing cartoonist, was visiting Dennis and was working on a series of political cartoons for a client that was taking on MAGA. And I shot it, but I didn't. I thought, oh, I'll shoot it, but you know what? I don't know how relevant this is going to be because Biden's going to win in a landslide because Americans have woken up to this absolute fascist nonsense, this book banning and all this crap. That's all going to get tossed, and then so it's not going to be that relevant. But I was fortunate that I did interview Pete about those cartoons, the political cartoons he was doing, and then the election, and it really has changed everything. There is now an attack, and so the relevance of Dennis's fight, the death by 1,000 cuts, we all have to do our part and stop wherever the attacks occur, or we lose it. And so the relevance is really there, and I'll be quiet now.
Dennis, how does it feel?
Very
the center
weird,
of a documentary.
Very weird, Ted, I have to say. I have been involved in other documentaries about other cartoonists as a talking head, and I enjoyed doing that. It's very different being the focus, I guess, of one. So, yeah, I'm just trying to, cooperate. I'm glad these guys think it's interesting enough. I can't be objective about myself, but I guess, I guess the kinds of things they do are not common. It's not something I think about, I just do what I do. And I've been doing it for a long time. I kind of take it for granted.
I actually appreciate that a lot because what you do, as they were both pointing out, is to kind of distill it, you have a specific moral compass, in that free speech is important, but that there's a difference between free speech and hate speech, and that free speech doesn't mean speech without consequences. It means that, like, if you see something and you think it's worth publishing, you'll find a way to publish it and hopefully find a way to break even on it, rather than going, oh, this is too dangerous, or oh, whatever.
Yeah. As a publisher, you have all those thoughts. You have to,
yeah.
I think what helped for me, when I was right out of high school and I wanted to be a cartoonist, there was no place in the world you could go to train to be a cartoonist. There were art schools, but the art schools hated cartoons. That was considered the lowest of the low to even call yourself, an art. And I had teacher after teacher tell me how deplorable cartoons were. So I just dropped out of various art classes because I didn't think I fit. And so I majored in journalism in college. And in retrospect, that was actually a pretty good choice because if you're going to be a good cartoonist, you have to know how to write and write efficiently. And I love the fact that journalism uses the old inverted pyramid theory, which is the most important stuff at top, and then it diminishes. So
at least we hope that it does. The New York Times has been burying the lead a lot lately.
And early on, the freedom of the press was a core. And so when I was able to get a foothold in comics, my journalistic training never left me, and the whole freedom of the press just was part of comics, were part of the larger press. So it came naturally. And it's particularly chilling now to see an administration that is so anti-media, calls the media our enemy, has banned now certain journalists from White House press gatherings. And it's, let's not get down that road. But so
I appreciate that. What I brought to comics was that background as a trained journalist. It also was very helpful over the years getting publicity and understanding how newspapers worked and what a slow news day was and how to kind of manipulate that. And it was very helpful when I had no money for advertising. I relied on free publicity. Um, so, it was a long, strange journey. And
Wait a minute. No, that's the Grateful Dead. You can't steal.
yeah,
You can publish them, but you can't steal from
well,
them.
no, I know, but I think it's a parallel in a way,
It is.
With Dennis, one of the reasons that we had gotten along so well, I believe, even though I am not an easy person to get along with, um, at the core, all three of us, we care, and most importantly, I there's a saying. People think the saying is that that money is the root of all evil, and that's not the case. The real quote is the love of money is the root of all evil. And when you meet people who love money, you can't you can't do business with them. You can never trust them. And throughout this whole process, there's no none of us are trying to make this movie to make money. It'd be nice to make money, but we're making this movie because it's a statement worth making. And along the way, we've had discussions about money if we receive funding. And the first questions we all ask are, we've had there's a group called Harmonica Lewinsky, which has given us the craziest music and so much fun. This other group in Denver called Log. They gave us a piece of music for the trailer. Um, and all of us have been talking along the way that if we make money and are able, the first thing we want to do is pay the people who,
Right.
the people who came with nothing. I mean, we haven't offered them anything, and this is just right now it's ethereal. It's in the air. And so that they sacrificed their time, they gave us their music, they did some sound mixing for us, and we want to make a great product, and we want to make sure that we can look back at everybody, and if they're not happy, we can't make everybody happy, but we can look them honestly in the eye and say that we did everything we could to make this right. And the reason I'd say that is because Dennis, I'm not saying I'm share every commonality with Dennis, but one of the things that when Dennis told me the story is that I see myself. Whenever I get money from a client, the first thing I think about is paying not my vendors, and before I even pay myself, because I want them to be paid. And when Dennis started his first publishing company, he wasn't making money, and yet he had some of Crumb's work, and then Dennis had a friend who became his manager, and the first thing he said was, "You've got to stop giving so much money to the artists. You're paying above and beyond what the artists are supposed to get." Which I'm the same way. I want to make sure everybody's happy, but yet if I'm not able to pay my bills, what's the point? And so that Dennis, I think, was a cathartic moment, if I'm correct, Dennis, for you, that it's a business too.
Yeah, it's true. When I started the first couple of years, I asked around and I heard that 10% was kind of a standard royalty. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of chintzy to me. I picked 16%. I thought that was realistic, 1/6 basically of gross. And when my eventual partner came along and before he agreed to be my partner, he wanted to look at all the business mechanicals, and one by one he checked out. He said, "Hey, seem to be paying your printer the right amount. Your rent's reasonable. All these things." He said, "Where'd you come up with this royalty of 16%?" And I said, "Well, that one I kind of pulled out of the air." And he said, "Well, that's why you're not making any money. You're giving away a thin profit margin to the artists." And he said, "I won't join you unless our business model allows us to make a profit." So he convinced me. So I had to go then to artists and say, "Hey, I can't pay you that anymore." In fact, shortly after that, Crumb was visiting, and I had very awkwardly brought it up, and I finally said, "Robert, I can't pay you 16% anymore. I have to go to 10%. And he said, I have no idea what you pay me. My wife gets all the checks. He didn't care and he didn't know. And basically all the artists were like that. We all just wanted it to be fair. We knew the old business model really exploited artists. And it's sad if you look at the careers of the comic book artists in the 40s and 50s, a lot of these guys just worked their ass off and they made very little and they had no side benefits. They didn't even get to keep their art. They didn't get to keep their copyright. So my generation was adamant that if we're going to build this thing we call underground comics, the business model has to be artist friendly. And that's how it was established. And so I didn't intend to be a publisher. I was going to be one of those cartoonists. I just happened I filled a vacuum. There was a vacuum for publishers, and I had just enough of a knack for business that I could do it. But I wasn't really a businessman. And everything was just built on the premise of things need to be equitable. And it grew from there.
But I was just going to say, Dennis, and I've joked with you about that, is that the sad fact is that here you are, and I try to be so equitable, and yet somebody on the outside, the artist who gives you the work, and then they see the final book and they're like, why am I only being paid this? All you did was slap the pages together, print it, and why are you getting all? And we joke about the fact of just all the ancillary things that have to happen before you even get to the printer.
Yeah. There was an artist, there was a cartoonist who I published many of his works. And at one point, he basically said that to me. He said, you're getting a disproportionate share. And he said, I just want to tell you, I'm going to now become a self-publisher. And I said, that's great. And he said, what, you're happy? And I said, yeah, you're going to find out how difficult it is. And someday you're going to come back and you're going to tell me how fucking miserable it was trying to publish your own books and get them into the market. And it happened. I'm not going to name names, but nobody, yeah.
The generation that I grew up reading, the self-published of the 90s, what I'll say as I've gotten to know a lot of them, that they almost all have a very similar story. They've got one person made good comics, and their spouse or significant other or whatnot had the business sense to make everything else work.
Yes, it's a lucky cartoonist who has a smart spouse who
right. That's the Terry Moore story. That's the Jeff Smith story.
Truth is it's having published myself. I own Tinto Press, so I've done a decent amount of publishing. Nothing like what Denis has done, but the truth is, it's hard all around. It's hard for the artists because they work and slave, and they may get in, even if they get on Fantagraphics, or if they get a larger publishing deal, maybe they're getting 6%, maybe they're getting 4%, maybe they're, but
they should demand 16%. Ted.
Well, and I understand the anger there. I completely understand it, but the stores that carry the books take half.
Yeah,
they take half of that cover price.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
if you
they
have a
also
distributor,
need that.
If you have a distributor, they want 10% or 12% on top of the half.
Yep.
So if you're working with somebody like Diamond, or they want to pay you 35% of that cover price. You're lucky if you can print in numbers where the cost of the book is less than half of the cover price anymore. And that's becoming more and more difficult with, the tariffs and and the cost of paper and toner and everything. The printers sometimes aren't making that much money, even because the toner people, are making the money, and the people that are making the printers are those expenses are going up. So it's just a difficult business for the fact that it's not a worldwide. I mean, there's a worldwide audience of people who read comics, but it's a small percentage of the population.
Right.
And so, I would.
And I mean, all the costs that you're talking about are even before you get into the challenge of how do you get your stuff into
Promotional
their hands. I
expenses.
say, as I am just subscribing to your newsletter because I was only vaguely aware of Tinto Press, which is terrible because as I flip through your catalog, I have all of the stuff from Carl Krumholtz. I
Oh,
have
nice.
I have the Alfalfa book. I have a
great.
number of the books that you have in your catalog, but because I bought them directly from the creators, which is one of the creator challenges, is that they often have to be at cons to say, "Hey, take this."
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, and I think the smarter creators, but not always the purchasers, understand that it's a business in general where the margin lines are thin. I mean, you mentioned that bookstores take 50%, but like I've become friends with the people at Lion's Tooth, and like even with their 50%, managing to stay open
They got
is
to pay
a
the rent.
challenge. Right? They've
They
got
got
to
to
pay
pay
rent. They've got
their
to
cash register person. They have to pay.
right.
They have to pay to keep the lights on. Absolutely.
Right.
So
Basically, it's difficult for everyone
yeah, it's
Right.
tough for everyone.
except the reader.
Yeah. But that's why I remind the readers that spending money on comics is a valuable thing to everybody involved. And B,
Yeah, if you want to support the arts,
I mean,
it's going away.
what I love most about Dennis, what I love most about Lion's Tooth and some of the great bookstores and comic shops, what I love most about so many of the creators I know is that they understand that the community is necessary for anybody to really make money in comics, for anybody to live in comics.
Yep.
They need to try to do it together, not at each other's expense.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt if it gets picked up for a television show.
No, it certainly doesn't hurt, though it doesn't always pay as well as you'd think either.
That's true too.
Uh, I was talking to a friend recently who has an adaptation of one of his movies coming out with an A-list actor, and he's like, "Yeah, we got paid, not nearly as much as you'd think."
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of stories out there, and Dennis can tell those stories better than anyone. He was involved with, for instance, he published The Crow, for instance.
Okay. Yeah.
It was a huge, successful movie, and I could let him talk about that.
Yeah, I don't think you've talked about The Crow here. Tell me about The Crow.
That's what you want to talk about, sure. I mean,
he published The Crow. Next question.
No, it's exciting when one of them actually makes it to the big screen and is successful. But the batting average for that is pretty low. You can option things and get some, halfway decent money, but it's rare that they get beyond a development stage and actually pay that purchase price. But it's still part of the business, and you have a lot more misses than hits.
Right.
And even the hits are more likely to be singles or doubles. The Crow was a home run, by most standards. And as a publisher, I benefited from the Crow movie being made because sales went from pretty good to amazing pretty much overnight. And Kitchen Sink ended up selling around 400,000 copies of that graphic novel. And that paid the rent for a long time. And I mean, I'm still James O'Barr's agent, and he's still, the Crow is still all kinds of incarnations all over the world. It's still successful. It's a
Yeah.
franchise.
Uh,
But
yeah.
cartoonists, look at that and they go, well, I can do that. It's not easy, it's
Yeah.
like anything. It's like acting, baseball, whatever. You see a handful of people who are very successful. You see a lot of people who are, you know, struggling at various levels to get there, and many never get beyond.
And it's not always pure talent. And
Yes,
in
a
an
lot of it
industry
is
like
luck. It's luck, it's timing, it's subject
yeah,
matter.
luck and timing. And in an industry like comics, it's often how many hats can you wear? If you're a decent cartoonist and a decent writer, but also a decent marketer and a decent business person, you're way more likely to make it than the brilliant artist who
It's
doesn't
true.
know what a contract means.
There,
This
I,
is one of
yeah,
those things that makes Dennis special is that
It
he's
is.
the unicorn that has, he has the artistic sensibilities and the business acumen, or really, I don't know if it's business acumen so much as it is he's just a personable guy that he can talk to anybody. He deals with difficult people very, very easily, which comic artists, may I say, need I say more? And
They can be interesting.
and he's open to ideas. Like one of my favorite stories that Dennis tells is him publishing a 78 of Crumb's band, R. Crumb and the Cheap Suit Serenaders. I don't know if you've ever heard this story, but
I have not.
Dennis, you gotta give him the heads up on that one.
well, this would have been 1975, I think. And Crumb was passing through town with two guys that he played music with, Al Dodge and Bob Armstrong. Bob is also a cartoonist. He did Mickey Rat comics. And so they were jamming at my place, and I love their music. And I said, you guys should be recorded. Are you recorded? And they all went, nah. And I said, gosh, and then I remember, Robert collected 78s. I collected old jukeboxes that played 78s. So I half
Oh,
jokingly said, we should
you have
put out
my
a,
world's favorite collection then. I don't own one, but that's one of my dreams is to own
yeah,
a 78 jukebox.
wow. Um,
Then I'd
yeah,
have to buy more
when
78s,
when I was in
yeah.
Wisconsin, yeah, one time I had in my barn about 30 jukeboxes
Oh,
because
wow.
people were selling them for 50, $75, and
Right?
I had a pickup truck. I'd go pick them up. And so anyway, so I half jokingly said that to the band, and they all kind of perked up and said, "Oh, that would be cool." And then they expected me to follow up. So I said, well, all right. So I started calling, record manufacturers. And as soon as I said 78, they were like, are you crazy? That's been obsolete for, at least 20 years when I called. And but I persisted, and it took months, and I finally found an old guy in Nashville, I think. And he didn't say no right away. He said, well, I think I got one covered with a tarp. Let me go dust it off and see if it still works. So a week or so later, he said, yeah, he got it running. Then he had to see if somebody still made 10-inch platters. So finally, yes, found someone who did it. And so after about a year of recording them locally, we put out a 78. Now I had a partner at the time who was not a dreamer like me. He was a very practical business guy. And he said, what the fuck are you doing? He said, this was a joke. And when it was a joke, I laughed. And now you're getting serious. He said, how are we going to sell a 78? And I said, I just have faith. It's just cool. And, Crumb's name
Well, I
was,
don't see any available at your store now, so you must have sold out.
yeah, no, I think they're long gone. But
Yeah.
it happened. And So I asked the old guy in Nashville, what's the minimum I can print that'll be worth your while? And he said, well, you got to do at least 5,000 or it's not worth it for me. And my partner said, 5,000? Are you kidding? But I was the head of the company. I pulled the trigger and we not only sold those 5,000, we reprinted another 5,000. And we probably could have sold a third printing, but my partner was getting apoplectic that we would get stuck with the rest. So what it proved to me is I always tried to trust my own gut instinct because I knew that at heart I'm a collector and I know what's cool when I see it. And if I make something cool, I gotta think there's a few thousand other people who will share my aesthetics. And it almost always worked out. Not that
Well,
that's business advice you should take.
no, well, this is a question that I've been meaning to ask because it's one of the biggest differences between the book publishing world and the comics publishing world really actually comes down to storage. Comics don't want to sell anything that, don't even want to print things that they can't flip immediately, whereas the book publishing world thinks more in terms of 5 and 10 years for a return on a novel or whatnot. So how, I mean, because yeah, I agree. If you like something, you should be able to find 5,000 other people that like it. But then the challenge is, out of the 9 billion people in the world, how do you manage to allow, or how do you manage to actually find those 5,000 people and let them know it's available, and how much time can you allow for that before it becomes not worth doing?
Right. And I think a lot of those customers probably never played the record because they didn't have the right record player, unless they got
Right.
mom and dad's old, one that played all three speeds.
I would have been the crazy guy that went out and bought a record player for
Yeah,
it.
and it was good bouncy music. Yeah. I mean,
You know,
I
there's a
was proud of
nostalgia
it.
aspect. There's a
Yeah.
nostalgia aspect to it, but also too. I mean, do you remember the Pet Rock?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, sure.
Do you remember the invisible dog walking the leash that
That's
had
right.
the? It was a hard. It was basically like the leash was hard, so it looked like you were walking an invisible dog. They were ridiculous. And how many Pet Rocks were sold because somebody knew marketing,
Right.
and so there are so many things that end up being hits that people just buy because they were duped, and they move on. It's hard to be a good artist, writer, publisher, and also promoter. It's tough,
Right.
and so I have mad props for Dennis in that regard because that's
But
a
yeah,
tough.
did you have a warehouse early on? I guess
Oh,
was my
yeah.
question, because like that I
Well,
think having a well organized warehouse can be a game changer in terms of being able to sell. I mean, because sometimes when I'm talking to independent cartoonists right now, one of the problems is they're running out of apartment space.
yeah.
They need to get people to buy
Well,
books so that they.
um, well, when I started, I lived in a apartment. It was a second floor walk up, and it had an attic that was on the third floor, of course. And the first couple of books that I published, it came like I think 500 books in a long box, kind of like a white comic box, and they were heavy. And I had to schlep them up 3 flights of stairs, set them down, go back to my hearse and get another. And when I finally got a couple of partners, after doing that once, they said never again. So very quickly, as just a practical matter, we found a place we could afford in Milwaukee and, moved a couple of times. And finally, my solution was leaving Milwaukee, where rent was relatively high, to further north in Wisconsin, where I bought a farm that came with a nice big empty barn. And so I just slowly remodeled the barn, one unit of space at a time. And as long as I could insulate it from dampness and so on, then I could store comics in there. And eventually the entire barn was filled with offices, and it pushed out the warehouse, and I had to build a warehouse next to the barn. And so necessity, is what determines it. And but yeah, there's no question you have to be prepared for that kind of growth when you start a small enterprise, because sometimes it doesn't stay small.
Well, but also like you brought up with the Crow, um, Crow had been around for a while before it became a movie. So for a while, you had however many you'd printed, and you'd get orders, and it was important to get them out and whatnot. But if you'd had to pulp huge amounts of books, or you'd had to drastically discount huge amounts of books, then when the Crow hit, you would have had to immediately go print a huge amount of books to be. I mean, that's actually one of the problems that Marvel and DC run into on a regular basis, is that their movies come out and they haven't gotten a round of graphic novels out to go along with the movie. And by the time you've got a bunch out, the next movie is out, and
Well,
people don't want the Captain Marvel anymore.
that's
Comic
not
shops
the
are
best,
always
yeah.
like furious about this. It's like, hey, we've got a movie coming out and you're out of print on all of the best titles for the character in the movie.
Well, that doesn't sound like the best run company then.
No, it doesn't, does it?
It's funny though that Dennis mentioned the farm that he bought, and what I distinctly remember from that story on the logistics side is that Dennis purchased that farm, and he had a bunch of like-minded friends, right, Dennis? Who, when Dennis said he bought a farm, and gosh, you guys can move out here, and we can all pitch in and do a little work, and we can live, the dream. And what happened? All those people didn't do work.
Well, it turns out not all hippies are industrious. I found out.
Who knew?
Yeah, they liked living there and smoking weed and being, kind of unproductive. And it cost at least a
They
couple
were
of...
the talent, Dennis. They were the talent.
Well,
But I'm sorry.
I mean, I'll just leave it as I was young and naive and an idealist.
Yeah.
And it takes some experience to realize, okay, some of the ideas you have are not necessarily practical. And, I was a card-carrying socialist then, and I thought, hey, we'll start a utopia here. It just doesn't work that way.
One of the things that I like about Dennis's marketing is that he doesn't really apply a whole lot of marketing science to anything. Like again with the 78, a rational person could be convinced that that's a bad idea, but he went with his gut. It wasn't about, and I don't think it was about marketing it so much. It was a cool thing by a cool guy. Or anti-cool guy, I don't know, depending on what you think of R. Crumb, but and it worked, and that's that he was taking a chance, but it worked. There's something very sincere and kind of artistic about that I really love.
Well, go ahead, Dennis.
Well, I was going to say, it's also a reason I don't think it would have been easy for me to work for a bigger company. Those ideas would have been shot down. It wasn't my money. It wasn't my decision. I think it would have been very uncomfortable, and I wouldn't have stayed in publishing. So it's just a factor, if you want to be able to do whatever you want, you've got to have the wherewithal. And it took a while to get to that point. I had no working capital at all starting out, and I couldn't go to a bank with hair halfway down my back and fuzzy face. Bankers would have shown me the door very quickly. So I had to self-capitalize, and that's a slow process,
Well, and I think you also said a really key word that I think balances your story really well, which was you realized that it wasn't practical. You
Huh.
you you well, but you remind me a lot of Bill Veeck in baseball and Richard Feynman in physics. Like
Wow.
you're willing to take risks. You want to take risks. The fact that nobody's ever done it before isn't at all a good reason not to do it. But at the same time, if you go to set up your commune and you discover that most of the people are there to smoke pot, not like fix up the barn, you go, let me rethink this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Well,
You know,
the reference to Bill Veeck I love, because he
you'd
was
like
a
Feynman too if you don't know him well.
Well,
I not
what
enough to understand it, but I know he was a kind of a maverick in physics. But I remember when Vec wrote his autobiography, it was called Vec as in wreck,
Yep.
because he upended things.
Hmm.
I just remember you talking about Dennis about when Stan Lee reached out to you and you guys agreed to do the spoof superhero comic. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but then the your artists were allowed to keep their work, and Stan Lee called you basically apoplectic because his artists had found out that your artists got to keep their work and they did not. They were going to go back to the drafting board for X dollars an hour, whereas
Yeah, it's very odd thinking of that again because you have to look. The context on that was the publisher at Marvel for many years was a guy named Martin Goodman who owned the company, and he reached an age where he finally decided to retire and move to Florida. And so Stan, who had been his editor since he was literally a teenager, he made Stan the publisher. Well, Stan was a terrific writer and editor, but shortly after he became publisher, and he was very green at it, is when we discussed this idea of me putting out a magazine for him. And I flew to New York and I basically said what you summarized there, which is the artists I work with, they're going to expect the original art back. They're going to expect to own their copyright and they expect to be able to, use the F word and whatnot. And I don't know if we can work this out. And he said, no. He said, I think we can do this. He said, we'll put you in a magazine so you'll be on newsstands. You don't have to worry about the Comic Code Authority. So that's okay. And he said, yeah, we can make exceptions for you. So the deal we cut was honest. It blows my mind, but he was not a good negotiator. And so this, relatively young hippie from Wisconsin, of all places, basically pulled a fast one on the New York publisher. And so, yes, inevitably, the guys in the bullpen and everyone else, they found out pretty quickly this was a sweetheart deal and they resented it. And then he was in a dilemma. And so the easiest thing was kill the magazine because he had let Pandora out of the box. But it was great for that year or year and a half because all the starving artists I was dealing with made Marvel money and we had newsstand exposure. They were printing 200,000 copies instead of our usual 10,000. So a lot of people had their first major exposure that way. So, yeah, again, I never could have predicted that. And it's funny even talking about it now, but
but
yeah.
Ted mentioned the unicorn aspect with you, and I'm not trying to blow sunshine here, but it's unique that the artists you were fighting for the art for the artists, and so you would think that Stan Lee would just hate you, or you two would not, and yet you two corresponded and had a good relationship, and that shows the sign of a mature somebody, a Wisconsin man who could be a reasoned publisher.
Well, I mean, even the way I got to know Stan, it started with me self-publishing my first comic, sending it to him as a fan with a brief letter, being surprised to get a letter back, having the temerity to send him another, and pretty soon we were pen pals. And I mean, I thought this guy's way too busy to be a pen pal, but there was something about the letters I sent him that he thought were funny. Even the letterheads. I used to, in those days, I had, still do, a letterhead for every day of the week. And some of them were funny in a dry kind of way. And one of them was my office at the time, as the letterhead said, was located I think it said our it had the word prestigious in it. It was like in the prestigious loft above the Polyprim dry cleaner. Oh, on Milwaukee's prestigious east side. And that was just a fine print at the bottom of the letterhead, and it broke them up. And I think to this day, if it hadn't been for that little sly line in the letterhead, we wouldn't have gotten to the point of talking business. But it says something about him that he was open to something new and receptive. This was quite a gamble he took. And I mean, I don't mean to belittle that he gave us things he shouldn't have. I would rather admire him for taking that chance and putting a significant budget into a big gamble. So there are people who criticize Stan. To me, he was always a gentleman and he was fair and right to the end. I think when we did my partner John Linden and I did a collection of the best of comics book, which was that magazine. And Stan was already like, I think 90-ish or approaching it. And I asked him if he'd write an intro. And he not only did, he said it was one of the things he was most proud of, which kind of surprised me. Because
this is where I got to throw in a shameless plug, just because it was appropriate right at the beginning of this whole talk, and more so now that we've talked about the intricacies of Stan Lee. My good friend and regular 22 Panels contributor wrote the award-nominated play House of Ideas that showed in Chicago this last idea about Stan and Jack.
Yeah.
Mark Prott met Denis the first time he was on the air. We talked to him because his play then was The Seduction of Innocent. So the Seduction of the Innocent. So the Denis and his legal defense fund was very relevant to the work there. But the artwork was a major point of contention between Kirby and Lee in particular.
Eventually, yeah.
But it also seems to have started with Goodman. So it was like kind of a in between, it wasn't that Lee wasn't somewhat.
It was the company policy,
Right.
I mean, Martin Goodman's was a traditional kind of old school publisher, and that's a kind way of putting it.
Right.
An unkind way would be the way Harvey Kurtzman portrayed Martin Goodman in his classic Jungle Book. He portrayed him as a schlock publisher. And Martin Goodman's attitude was, I'm paying these guys, $5 or $10 a page. That's my page. Was he going to give it back? That was his. That was their attitude. And I think Stan inherited. You got to remember, I think Martin was his uncle by marriage. And
and his father was alcoholic and mostly absent, so there was definitely an interesting family dynamic.
Yeah.
He was the nephew that was kind of given a job out of pity.
Yeah. Well, and also
lots of stuff going on.
Well, and actually kind of tyrannical in the office as a teenager. Yep. Before Adele Hassan married Harvey Kurtzman, she worked at the Timely office. She was Stan's right-hand girl, as they used to say. And so she was there when Stan was a teenager, and she said one time she walked in the office in the morning and he was sitting cross-legged on top of a file cabinet, and everyone who came in had to bow to him like he was a Buddha statue or something. He did silly things. One time there was an artist named Frank Giacoya, one of the old timers, who liked to smoke a cigar and read the New York Times early before the work started at 9 a.m. And one morning, Stan saw him still reading the paper with a cigar in his mouth at like 5 after. And he canned him for the day. He said, Frank, you're going home, breaking the rules. So it didn't sound like a nice kid. It sounded like, hey, my uncle owns this place and you have to take my orders no matter what age I am. And obviously he got more mature, but imagine being given the responsibility as a teenager to run an office. I don't know how many employees, but there are a lot of people there, including Al Jaffe was there at that time and other people you'd remember. So, that's like, you don't hear stuff like that because there are very few people who witnessed it who were alive by the time fans were curious.
Yeah.
And just a little teaser, Tad, for our documentary. Karen Green is the curator.
Love Karen.
Yeah, the comics for Columbia University, and Columbia University has about, I think it's over 50,000 documents of Denis's archived letters, just everything.
It's 50-some thousand just letters plus other documents. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so, but in them, I was looking at one today. Actually, it's from Stan. Right. It's between you and Stan Lee, and you had apparently written him a letter, considering doing a satire of Spider-Man. He wrote back basically saying, "Absolutely not."
That's right.
Because if you do that satire, we lose the copyright. So there's no way in hell you're touching.
Yeah,
that.
And I mean, I would still argue. I mean, a satire is protected, but I wanted to do an extensive one that probably went too far. But yeah, that was an example of him. I hit a raw nerve there, and he got a little paranoid. But
it was fun. It was genial.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, he was, it's like a brother saying to you, no effing way.
But I think he said you're out of your fucking mind, as I think.
Yeah. So there's some really good stuff that we're going to show in the documentary. There's some fun correspondence. There's another one that I won't share, but it's extraordinary. Some of the stuff that we're going to show. Just from a cultural perspective, the way people responded when asked about themselves and what their fears, I guess. So I'm not going to talk any more about that, but that'll be in the doc.
Yeah, we've got a few new people that have just sort of signed on to be interviewed. So Alison Bechtel is one that we have recently. She's given her okay. They're okay for that. And Dan Klaus actually is going to be interviewed, so we're happy about that. Noah Van Sciver, we just talked to him.
His new book was excellent. I read it yesterday.
Oh, I read it last week. Yeah, it was pretty good. I liked it.
Beat it, Rufus.
I actually, what's funny about that is I actually just read his Grateful Dead thing, which was also very good.
I still need to read that. Yeah.
I don't think there aren't too many things that he's done that I don't really enjoy.
No, Noah's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's so prolific.
Oh my God, he's fast.
How many pages a day does he do?
He can whip them out if he's really I used to go to a drink and draw with him every Wednesday night. I would drive him to the thing because he didn't have a car, and he could just work. He's very focused, and there's no nonsense about his work. A lot of people that were his age when we were doing it, they would labor. I'm one of those people that labors over. You mentioned the Alfalfa book. That took me a long time to do that little 24-page comic.
Yeah.
And he could do something like that, over a course of a couple of weeks if he wanted to.
Wow.
He doesn't mess around. He doesn't mess around with the computer much either. He, goes straight to the lettering. He can see it. You're one of those people too, Dennis. I said, how do you letter things without penciling it in first? Because I just can see it on the page before before I write it down, I can make it fit.
Oh,
And I
wait a minute. See, now I'm feeling even more stupid. So I've actually met you, Ted. I bought alfalfa from you at Cake
Yeah.
cake. Okay, great.
in probably 2019.
Yeah, that was a while back. Yeah. That I only did cake once, so yeah, it was a lot
I
of
was
fun.
there.
A lot of fun.
That's funny.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate
The first
anybody.
of a series, right, Ted?
Well, I have a second one out about Mickey Daniels, who was he was a silent movie. He was like a generation before Alfalfa, and during the before they had talkies, and that one's out, and it's called Horse Laugh. And I'm actually
The
working on
Death of
one,
Freckles.
The Death of Freckles. Do you have that one too?
I don't, but I'm
Oh,
looking at it on your website.
okay. And I'm working on one. I've been working on it, quote
I've
unquote.
been looking for you at Cake every year since because I knew that you were working on more.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, working on it, between other things, but
Well, you were very excited in 2019. You made it sound like they were going to come out on a regular basis.
yeah. Well, that
And I
didn't
haven't
happen.
talked to you since then, so I didn't know.
Yeah, I think in 2019 I started to work on the next one, which was about the character that played Farina, who was a sort of the black kid. You know what I mean? Quote
Right.
unquote. He was one of the early ones. He was sort of Buckwheat was kind of like Farina 2.0, and I talk about that in this new book. So I've been working on that one for quite that one's going to be a little longer. It's a little bit more serious work, but this isn't about me.
But
So
this is what happens when a cartoonist becomes a publisher, right?
yeah, you get sidetracked easily. I was supposed to be at the
Well, it's
drinking
also what
Quiet
happens
Park.
on this podcast. We definitely get sidetracked easily. For that matter, I'm going to drop something in the chat that's breaking news, and I'll let Dennis decide if we want to get sidetracked by it.
Breaking news.
Yeah, I just got an email. Um,
Oh.
and this one of the questions that I want to ask that we might work this news story into is that one of the more recent books that I've picked up from you and I've loved is your consumer comics, which you made just in time for them to end the grants that you made it for. And we seem to be going through another phase of that where it's like all sorts of good, interesting things that have
Yeah.
been
The funding gets cut off. Yeah.
the funding has been taken away or
Yeah.
things have been erased.
Well,
So,
yeah.
I mean, kind of talk to me a little bit about what it's like to have been at the forefront of the counter revolution 40 years ago and have to see it come back as you're having a documentary
Well,
made about you.
they say history is cyclical, so it would have been easy to predict, not at this level of
Insanity.
shitstorm, but yeah. I mean, it seemed much simpler when I was in my 20s, and Richard Nixon seemed like the most evil person there could be. And my God, I'd rather have him in the White House, almost anybody.
Hey, at
But
least he believed in climate change.
well, and yeah, he started the EPA. That's right.
Right.
But
I'm just
well, like that consumer comics thing wasn't. Well, I was at a local bar called Hooligans, and I was talking to a friend, and there was a guy sitting next to me in a suit I wasn't really paying attention to, and talking to my friend, comics must have entered the conversation because at some point the guy in the suit turned to me and like tapped my shoulder or something, and he said, "Are you in the comics business?" And I turned to him like, "Yeah, why?" And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a business card and handed it to me. And it said he was the Assistant Attorney General of state of Wisconsin in charge of consumer affairs. And he said he said, we hand out these really dry tracts to students to educate them. And he said, they don't seem to be very effective. And he said, I'm wondering if comics might be a way to reach these kids with a message they'll actually learn. And so I took his card and I said, well, that sounds interesting. You know, we can follow up. And we did. And he managed to get the last grant from the Office of Economic Opportunity before Nixon killed it. And so myself and two other artists, Pete Poplasky and Pete Loft, did this thing working with people in the, obviously Department of Consumer Education, the point being to give it to 17-year-old high school seniors just before they legally can sign a contract. And these are common scams to watch out for, and just be smart before you sign anything. And it seemed to be pretty successful. And it got reprinted in a couple of other states. And somebody actually counterfeited it with bad art. And I forget how we found out. I've got a copy in my file somewhere. It's like somebody went to the trouble. They could have just Xeroxed ours, but they redrew it all, the same words and everything. And so, but through the reprints and the counterfeits and whatever, yeah, it reached a lot of kids, and I hope it made a difference. And the whole idea of educational comics was very appealing to me, and it's something I would have probably pursued. But the process of doing that and having everything fact-checked and everything questioned by bureaucrats just was oppressive. And when it was done, I was glad it was done, but I said never again. And it was...
It popped into my head in part because I've recently sat in on some like financial literacy classes for high school kids that they're watching YouTube videos from Charles Schwab without even anybody mentioning that
Wow.
these tutorials might actually also have a bias.
Right. Wow.
And I'm sitting there going, where's consumer comics now?
Well, you can Xerox your copy and pass it around.
Yeah.
I won't object.
We're literally letting the curriculum be handed out to the financial companies rather than...
the lobbyists are writing the laws anyways, right?
Exactly. That's where I was going.
Who was it? Stephen Colbert at the White House press dinner or whatever years ago, and it was under Bush, and he said that this should be the heyday for journalists. They literally are going to write the stories for you. All you need to do is go to the office and just turn it in. You can go back home and write that novel you've been dying to write for the last 10 years.
Right.
Basically calling them out for cowardice, saying, there's something that's going on here, folks, and you might want to report on it, but they're not. And so it's a strange time.
It's strange time is the nicest way to put it.
By the way, you
I'm
mentioned
so happy that they haven't noticed comics yet. Every once in a while, they'll talk about woke comics because Superboy is gay or whatnot, but they haven't actually taken the time to read comics and discover that we've been liberal forever.
There's not. That's because there's not a ton of money in it. That's the that is literally the only reason they haven't attacked it yet. That's one of the reasons that the queer community has been able to, make it their own to some extent, and that's the reason that comic.
And as you say that, they have gone after some comics.
I'm sorry?
YA comics that involve gay people, they'll go after, or black people.
Yeah.
Because we can't have those middle school kids knowing that gay and black people exist and are okay and are real human beings.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting because I think that it's the underground movements that are usually the ones that end up causing the revolution. And I don't mean
Absolutely.
like a violent overthrow. But there's there's cowardice. It's back going back to the money thing. Too many Americans are too in debt, too beholden to banks, to credit cards and
Student
obligations
loans.
that they
Don't forget
can't,
my student loans.
and they're not going to rock that boat. They're,
Right.
and they're just saying, hey, and that was exactly what happened in the 1930s. I've got this little piece of land here. I don't rock this boat. Well, the boat's going to get rocked. Either way, you can be accountable now and step up, or you can wait until, quote, the cows come home. But eventually, there's got to be payback for.
I think the cows got bought by multi-million-dollar corporations. They're not actually coming home.
Nope.
The
Well,
tenor
have you seen
from now.
Have you seen the price? Have you seen that now? We went to Denmark asking for eggs, and now we're going to Germany. I mean, it's like, dude, we just squatted on your country and crapped all over it. What do you mean? And now we're basically just like, hey, you guys got some spare eggs? I mean, it's
Right.
just, it's insanity. It's insanity. On a lighter note, you guys mentioned the warehouse that Dennis had at in Wisconsin. I sent you a request. That's okay. I was going to show you.
Absolutely.
Dennis has we had a small teaser video that, let me see, can I do it now? Yep, there we go. Documents.
Nobody else gets to see this because we're audio only, but I'm going to get to see something cool.
Now, where is
There
it is. Yep. Okay, there we go. Up there. And can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
So just literally in the Cryogenic Institute, which is Dennis's warehouse in Massachusetts, I went in and just, for about a half an hour and just took some shots and I didn't move anything. And so
Right.
here you have, Dennis, what is that? Is that a printing, is that a press?
A printing press.
It is a printing press.
No, actually, it's if you have things that are wrinkled, it's a high pressure.
Okay. Yeah.
I forget, a press, but not a printing press.
It's a
right.
book press.
It's a book press. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just in that shot, I mean, you've got Crumb, Eisner, and is that Krupp in the back, Dennis, with the 60 cents each?
Yeah.
Yes, that's Steve Krupp.
That's Steve Krupp. So so there's a lot of fun stuff that we're going to show in the documentary. We also as a little side note.
I mean, I know that I just like going through his, and this is something that I don't think I've ever mentioned before. I love the fact that you leave stuff up on your website even when it's sold out, because it makes it half website, half museum.
Oh.
I like to be able to go through and go, oh, wow, that looks cool. I wish I'd bought it 10 years ago.
That's totally my wife's decision. She runs that entirely by herself.
Well, it was a good call.
Okay. I'll tell her that.
Because I do. I really enjoy being able to see things that aren't necessarily available, but are
actually you should say that. Send it to info@denniskitchen.com and she'll read it and she'll love getting a compliment. So
and if you could just send a picture of a Reese's peanut butter cup and tell her that she'll get those when the order is fulfilled. I promise you, she'll expedite that order. She likes the peanut butter cups.
Reese's peanut butter cups. Good to know. So the next time I make an order, I'll call Dennis and say, pick up some Reese's on your way home. Give them to your wife. tell her they're from me.
It'll be packed with extra loving care.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I'm going to start with you guys. Without necessarily spoiling anything that you don't want to spoil. Talk to me about something you didn't know before you started the project.
Oh gosh, so much.
That like really stuck out to you, as in like, wow, I thought you were cool before, but now, or wow, I
Yeah.
thought you were cool, and now I can't believe I'm making a documentary out of it because man, that was a jerk move. No, I
Okay.
don't think Dennis has ever done that.
Yeah, I won't get too much into this, but Dennis was drafted during the Vietnam War, and there's a story about that I'd prefer we don't tell
Correct.
right
Yeah.
now, but will be covered, and that was poignant. It was poignant and something worth hearing about, and
You just made it so I'm looking forward to the documentary more. And I
yeah.
was already looking forward to it.
But like there's some actually everything I find out, I go, wow, that is really cool. And I don't know everything. You'd think I'd be an expert on Dennis Kitchen at this point, right? But
Is it possible?
I mean, I don't know if Dennis is an expert on
That's
Dennis
my
Kitchen.
point.
He's the preeminent, expert on Dennis Kitchen, but I mean, there's a lot going on there, and he's not done yet. That's
Right.
that's the other thing
Yeah.
I'd like to
Yeah, thank you.
emphasize. He's
Let's
still
stress
working on
that
this
part.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You mean I'm not supposed to end this episode in loving memory?
No, gonna outlive all of us. He's gonna
He
attend
will.
my funeral, that's for sure.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah.
Not in favor of you having a funeral anytime soon. Just
Oh,
in favor
good. I
of
hope
Dennis
not.
being
I don't
around
know.
for it.
But just he's a font of not just knowledge about comics and collecting and First Amendment rights, but
Oh, that font. For a second there, I'm like, Dennis has his own font too. I mean, he's been in comics long enough. That would make sense, but I haven't seen the kitchen font.
fount, I guess, is the right. I don't know if I said
No,
that. But
autism brain, late at night.
oh, sure.
Forgive me. Forgive my.
Yeah. I stopped being able to, make complete sentences at about 8:30. So at night, that's what television is for. But yeah, he's also just a good friend and just a really interesting guy to have a beer with.
Well, that's how it started when I first met Ted at this little Denver show. And I liked him right away. And I think I said, "Are you busy, lady? You want to grab a beer?" And that's how it started.
Yeah. We ended up going on this long walk because we were trying to figure out where the party was, for the and we had heard it was at this bar. And we were walking with a couple of his friends as well. And we're walking here and we're walking there. And I was getting upset. I'm like, where the hell is this place? This is terribly unorganized. I'm part of this. I should know what's going on. And then we did finally find it. And we just, we had a great conversation. And, there were a lot of fans of Dennis there, obviously, surrounding him. So that was when I really started to find out about him. I don't know, Soren, what is there anything that you found out that, was that changed your attitudes or made an impression?
And you're muted right now.
I love the underground aspect. I was really impressed with the people that we interviewed because interviewing Mari Naomi, who was, who grew up basically believing that there was no one like her and that she was terribly alone. And that's an awful thing. I don't, an adult can deal with pain. It is what it is. When you hear about a child, it's like, because a child will blame themselves and they'll think that, which is exactly, I believe Marinomi was talking about, is that you think, well, then I'm wrong. There's a reason why that no one talks to me or likes me, and so with her, there was a young woman who he was best friends with. And then, when you start to come of age, if you are raised heterosexual and you've not been taught to be open-minded, what happened with Marinomi was that all of a sudden her best friend,
They,
stopped
They-
talking to her.
they,
I do apologize. I keep saying
No.
I am the worst, and I apologize. I'm a dinosaur, and it's funny.
I can
because
also be the worst sometimes, but that's why I try to when I
absolutely,
remember catch
and I
it.
didn't catch you on that. Yes, and so to Mari Naomi, my absolute apologies on that, and I am struggling with that. I think
And to
my-
Mari Naomi, if you're actually listening, oh my God, I'm incredibly flattered, and I'd love to have you on.
my saving grace in that regard is that anybody who knows me is that I am what I am, and
Yeah.
I absolutely unequivocally. I may not understand something, but the right to be, the right to exist.
I sometimes off air, when I know that there are pronouns that I might stumble over, just tell people I grew up with an English teacher for a grandmother, and I used to prefer they, them for everybody just because it was easier. And I was regularly reminded that that's a plural. But she was also as liberal as all hell. So I'm certain that if she was alive now, she would be 100% in the, if it makes them happy, you fucking do it.
Yeah, I teach a class at the local community college in motion design, and I have a lot of, non-binary and trans and different, other gendered people. And I make that mistake all the time. And I think people just appreciate it when you
I think intent
call
matters a
attention to the
lot.
mistake and then move on. That's all.
Yeah. Last thing, when Ted was at Turner TBS and I was at CNN, and they had quite a few classes there that you would go to for growth and development, and some of them were not that great. Some of them were pretty good, and there was one that was extraordinary, and it was about tolerance. And there was a young Black woman who was probably 22, 23 years old, and they were discussing tolerance, and then she raised her hand and she said, I can't stand that word tolerance, the way it's being used. And this other white guy and I looked at each other, and it was the most absurd thing. Like, we looked at each other like, oh, here we go with some, crazy. And she slammed us because she said, I don't like that word because I'll tolerate a 3-year-old baby who's screaming. I'll tolerate a racist jerk. But somebody whose sexuality, who they are, gay, straight, Black, Jewish, Christian, I don't care. I embrace them for that. And I tell them that I respect them for that. I don't tolerate that. And the guy and I, who before were looking at her like, oh, here we go. It was, a shame moment. Like, oh my God, I'm a little embarrassed. And, but that's okay. Shame's important. And when you meet people in life who will not be ashamed, who just blinders on and just go, they're not they look forward, they don't look back. Those are not the people I want to be around. We're not perfect.
No, they drive me up the wall.
Yeah.
I tolerate them.
I see what you did there.
Exactly.
Dennis, I'm going to flip this question over. What thing have you wound up sharing with these guys that you like, it was just a thing to you and they got particularly excited, and you're sitting there going, oh, maybe that is cooler than I thought it was?
I mean, I guess when I agreed to this, I didn't realize that when they were here, kind of every nook and cranny would be examined. I have like flat files of stuff that I organized for myself. I never thought a camera would be panning any of it. So some of it's just, strange and meaningful to me, but I suspect, you'll have to ask them, that when some drawers are open, they kind of scratch their head and went, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I was just going to say, to me, not being the comic person, I'm fascinated by the historical aspect, and I just loved just the amount of items and just the way that they were displayed. But when I went up there with Ted and also a gentleman named Jonathan Bayless from Sew Buttons. Is it Sew Buttons? Yep.
Jonathan
And-
is a regular on the show as well.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
not surprised.
Hi, Jonathan. He might actually be listening,
And so Ted
but only
and
because
Jonathan,
he sees Dennis's name.
but Ted and Jonathan, it was like they were two Catholics visiting the Vatican.
Yeah. He's Jewish. I'm actually Catholic though.
Well, so
But we were definitely
Soren,
a couple
what
of
are we
like,
gonna have to do to get you into comics?
what now?
What are we
You
gonna
know,
have to
it's
do to
interesting.
get Soren into comics?
I
The
was
greatest medium.
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I mean,
They got to send me some.
I think
I'm
he's
getting my T-shirt.
in the social aspects of it. You know, I think he's interested in the historical aspects of it, and he kind of comes into it from that angle. Like I'm really, you know, just to take a minute to stroke Soren here a second. I mean, we get into it a lot, but because we have different ideas about how to do things, but his ability to shoot stuff is amazing, and you know his stick-to-itiveness and his visual storytelling is I keep telling him I was like, wow, that was way better than I had hoped, you know, because anybody can point a camera and shoot it, but he knows how to light things. He knows how to he is a true artisan when it comes to, you know, getting a good shot, and I think that's really going to make a difference, I think, for the viewing audience in the end, you know, and we're probably gonna have a lot more arguments between now and when this thing is finished, but you know, I'm very happy. Like, I don't know how I could have.
You just gave me the first question for when you come back to
Okay.
pitch or to like plug the finished film. What was your biggest argument while you were making?
I was going to say, are we still talking?
Yeah, we have one every day.
It's in the contract that we're going to be flown in by private jets, separate private jets for all the premieres.
Yeah. Fortunately, you know, we're both of the opinion that, you know, as we're probably, you know, friends before we were coworkers, and that doesn't change just because we have a disagreement.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I'm watching The Bear right now, and I was a food server for many years, and just watching the intensity, and I like that. And one of the aspects of the show that I really enjoy is the fact that there are incredibly stressful moments in the kitchen, and something is dropped that's needed immediately, that's going to take hours to do, and there are screaming matches, and they're personal invectives, not like you're a pathetic loser, but you know, you shut the fuck up right now. Do, you know, where most people in a corporate environment, oh my God, HR's run, you know, life isn't perfect in high stress environments. You should never cross a line and be personal. And we don't do that. But if you can't occasionally be passionate and get a little angry about something and not be able to say to that person, hey, I'm sorry, I was, you know, we were arguing about this, but, you know, we're both trying to push this ball forward. And then, you know, we can laugh it off, and Ted will say, yeah, fuck you. And, you know, and we laugh. And
yeah,
that's,
well, I think there's some mutual respect, as much as we don't let our conversation reflect that respect. We do have respect. So at the end of the day, you know, we're able to compartmentalize it, you know, like I could tell you right now, we had a huge, you know, blow up on the second trip out to Denis's because he didn't like how I drove. I was driving. He's like, you're going to drive the truck back to the, you know, and I speed it up, you know, he was telling me to go faster and everything. And then I almost ran the truck off the road. Because, you know, Denis lives over the river and through the woods. I mean, he's in a remote
Yeah, Soren, I just want to let you know, in case we're ever in a car together, that I am the type that would pull off the road and say, "Do you want to walk?"
I did that. I think I said that at some point. Like, I'll pull this over and let you drive.
And I
But
should have.
but again, it was like, okay, we're good, and I'm sure, I have to make him explain things to me probably more than he would like. Um, we had a thing with the YouTube, one of the all the YouTube clips, we put a URL in the descriptions, and they got truncated, they got disabled because that's what YouTube does. We found out for shorter clips, and he tried to explain this to me, and I was, confused, and it was tense. But
Yeah. Well, it's like it's the publisher thing again. I've got, when you've got all these things going on, and then I've got to stop and explain. It's like, I don't want to explain right now. It's fucked up. Let's fix it. And but you know, again, it's the creative process. I loved when I was in advertising. I loved going into that room and throwing out ideas. And I had a phenomenal creative director, Beresford Mitchell, who was a Canadian guy, and I loved his approach towards advertising. But what he said was, look, those commercials that you see where they're a little risque, it didn't start that way. That started in a boardroom somewhere where a think tank was happening and ideas were being thrown out, and somebody said to them something that was so sexually absurd, but they laughed about it. We could never say that, but then they dialed it back just into the safe area to where there was a little sexual innuendo, but it's not offensive. But that process, something offensive things were said in the meetings in the description of how do we make this advertisement that has this sexual scenario, let's say. And in discussing it, there are some people who could be offended by use of words. I'm not interested in that. If I heard you, Ted, but I mean, a creative process, it can sometimes be down and dirty. And so as long as there is respect in that room, ideas should flow. Because from those ideas, you bring something that actually can pass, quote, corporate muster, where it's not going to be objectionable. So I love the creative process.
All right, my required final question. Tell me something you love, preferably a comic, though apparently Soren doesn't know any. That not enough other people have read, experienced, listened to, watched, whatever, and you want them to, so that you have more people to talk about with it or talk about it with. Yeah. And we can
I'll
go
go
in any
first.
order.
Yeah, I just picked up recently and was looking at it the last couple of days. Charles Burns's Comics, Kommix.
The covers.
There's no story. It's just these unbelievably weird. And I know weird. I create weird stuff, but I look at his stuff and it's so beautifully rendered and it's so out there. And every single one, I just savor. That's what
Yeah.
I think with his art is so beautiful and his ideas are so out there. I just stare at them. So I probably took as much time looking at that book as most people would do to read a book because I just soaked it in. So I would recommend that to anyone who just loves the aesthetics of drawing, you know?
Well, and he definitely shows why he's one of Francois's favorite people to turn to for New Yorker covers, because he can tell such a
Well,
such a
not often enough, I
story.
think, but anyway,
Yeah.
so that springs to mind as one that was particularly exciting recently.
Yeah.
I
I loved that book.
I happen to be reading a few new things for me. And the thing I'm reading right now is Impossible People, a completely average recovery story by Julia Wirtz, who is, sort of underrated, in my opinion. I don't know if you're familiar with Julia Wirtz's stuff.
That's been on my list for a while, but I haven't read it yet.
I think it just came out last year, or I'm not
Right.
sure, not too long ago.
That's a big book.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, that's got some thickness to it. And I'm almost done with it. And I just love her sense of humor. And, she's a much better drawer, artist than I think people give her credit for. She can draw buildings and landscapes. There's only one other person I would compare her to, and that's Carl Christian Krumpholz.
I love Carl. Hi, Carl. He's on the podcast regularly too.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, he's he lives right down, not too far from me, and we I published Queen City.
I saw that,
which is the best-selling book I've ever published in terms of straight sales. And
probably 90% in Denver.
Oh, I would say, yeah. Oh, definitely. Or people that are from Denver or Colorado that live elsewhere. Yeah.
I own a copy.
Okay. Well,
I've only been to Denver once, but Carl's a friend.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, he does great work. So
I met him the same day I met you, by the way.
Oh,
but he was at the next
we traveled together to that one. Yeah.
Wow.
He was back when I was I used to.
And his wife introduced me to Denis.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, I love his wife too. Yeah, just
Kelly's
wonderful.
amazing.
Yeah. They're a wonderful couple, and they're very, he's very talented, and she's just a wonderful human being. They make a fabulous couple,
Yep.
But I don't want to take too much away from Julia either, because
I
had nothing to do with this.
I have pages she has at her website. It looks
okay.
Yeah,
it just went higher on my list of things to read.
It reads very easily, and very, very relatable stuff. The humor is stellar. I laugh out loud reading her stuff, and I own a page of hers. I met her once at Dink, and got to interview her and did what was it? Noah and a couple other people, and just above average person, in all respects. So that's. What about yours, Soren? What's your favorite comic you've been reading lately?
What's funny? It's not a comic, but have y'all ever seen One Punch Man?
One Punch Man? I have not watched it, but I've read the first volume of the comic.
And I have not read it, but I watched it with my son was really into anime for a while, and
Right.
so I watched that with him, and I thought that was absolutely fantastic.
Oh, it's anime?
Yeah.
Is it anime? Is that just, again, I'm not the expert on that, but it is anime, correct?
It was manga first, and it's now both a successful manga and a successful anime. And I'll let Soren give the because it sounds like he's watched more. Give the, because it sounds like something that should be ridiculous, and it's not as ridiculous as it should be. So, tell us why.
Well, this is just basically, it's a guy who can kill somebody with one punch. And he goes through, and it's been a while, so please actually help me out. I just remember laughing at the scenarios that were just so absurd. And it was, it really blew me away. I walked away from that enlightened.
Yeah, what always strikes me about it is everybody knows he'll win any fight with one punch. He knows it, they know it. So there's a certain element of the drama is he would prefer just not to fight. And
right.
He gets pushed to it, and finally it becomes, well, okay.
Yes, and it's just utter destruction,
Right.
And I really enjoyed that. And so, my problem is that married with a 16-year-old son. I'm in this documentary. We've been working on this documentary for 2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's a learning thing for me. I remember seeing, hearing, someone's been, they took them 3 to 4 years to do the documentary. It's like, what, again, like talking to a publisher, what the hell are you doing back there, Dennis? I mean, how long did it take to publish a book? My God. And then you get in the weeds and you're like, holy crap. I mean, just the versioning for every video we make, I have to make it 16:9:54. I'm sorry, 16:9:45 and 9:16. Every version. And so if anything has changed, I have to go back and change all 3 versions every time. So I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of work that people don't realize. So, but it's worth it.
Well, never mind the deciding what goes in, what doesn't go in. Learning about something and deciding, oh my God, I didn't know about that. Now I want to go back and talk to this person and that person. Now I want to talk to this person and that person. This was the bane of my existence when I was writing research papers in college. It was like, when are you supposed to stop asking questions and start writing?
Yep. But
for me, it was generally about 4 hours before the paper was due. That is not what I recommend.
Yeah. I would like to just add one last thing about this documentary, and that is that I think there's a lot of red meat in this documentary. There's a lot of subject matter that's relevant and that is topical by sheer chance, really. But for what's going on in today's society, and both Soren and I were drawn to it for different reasons, that complement each other. And, I'd really like to recommend everybody to just go to the Kickstarter and hit that notify button so that we can actually get enough people following it so we can launch the Kickstarter and finish this thing, get the finishing funds for this, what I think is going to be, and I'm a pessimist, but I think this is going to be a pretty successful undertaking.
Well, I was really, really hoping, because at the beginning of our recording, I took to Blue Sky and told people to punch the saved button. And I was really, really hoping that I could report that had been successful. But you have the same 206 followers that you had an hour and a half ago. So I'm sorry. I'll keep trying.
That's okay. I mean, I
even refreshed just in case.
Every little bit helps.
And 206 is not nothing. This is a cool story. I'm certain that more followers will come. I know I was excited as all get out to see how somebody else would look at the life and put together the life of a friend of mine, even though I could only imagine, God, that must be weird to be the center of a documentary. That was my very first thought, Dennis, was exactly what you said when I asked the question at the beginning, is like, what's it like to be at the middle of one of those? Gentlemen, it's been a blast. Dennis, I always love talking to you. Soren and Ted, it was great to meet you. Hopefully we'll all talk again. For 22 panels, we will see you after the next page.
Hey guys, this is Tyler from 22 Panels. I'm here to tell you all about our Patreon. If you enjoy this show, please consider donating to our Patreon to keep this show going. We have many different tiers, all different levels, to help you decide what's right for you. Okay, so get on out there to patreon.com/22panelspodcast.